This is the Memory Palace. I'm Nate DiMeo. The kids had been awake all night, and the grown-ups wanted it that way. They brought in a rock and roll DJ. This was 1986, and this was Cleveland, so it was a rock and roll DJ, to make sure the kids stayed awake and pushed through till the end. The grown-ups had been doing their part for weeks. All the planning, all the meetings, secured sign-offs from the various agencies, sorted out the street closures, police overtime, alerted the Federal Aviation Administration. They commandeered a quarter of a city block downtown at the foot of Terminal Tower, the architectural marvel, the quintessential Beaux-Arts skyscraper that loomed over Lake Erie as the tallest building anywhere in the world that wasn't New York for a quarter century. A symbol of a city on the rise, from a time before that city stopped rising. When the building had gone up in the 1920s, Cleveland was in its 7th straight decade as a boomtown. It was the 5th largest city in America, a leader in the oil industry and the brand new automotive industry. But none of that lasted. Businesses closed or moved out of town. The ones who stayed poisoned the Cuyahoga River, accidentally set it on fire again and again. The last time it did, in 1969, Cleveland became a national joke. It could take the jokes. The city was tough, maybe not broad-shouldered. Chicago owned that. But what are you supposed to say when you are the epitome of industrial decline? When the ranks of your citizenry, your would-be defenders, had been cut in half. By 1980, Cleveland was the 18th largest city in America, and still had far farther to fall. But in 1986, they didn't know that yet. And one man, a guy who had previously worked in public relations at Procter & Gamble, and sold Pampers and Tampax and Old Spice and Crest toothpaste and Bounty paper towels and Joy dish soap, wanted to spread a little joy around Cleveland. He had just become the head of the regional chapter of the United Way, one of the biggest charities in Ohio, and he went into fiscal year 1986 dreaming big. He needed a major event at the end of Q4. To drive donations, of course, but he wanted more, something that would bring the city together, unify its diverse population under one banner, like the many brands within the product portfolio of a multinational consumer goods corporation. A way to get the city to rally behind a single message, that Cleveland was done being the mistake on the lake. The river hadn't caught fire in more than 20 years. In fact, there were new buildings, there was an entertainment district going up on its banks. Cleveland was once again on the rise, and it was time to show the world. With balloons. The metaphor, I suppose, was irresistible. The year before, Disneyland celebrated its 50th anniversary by sending 1.2 million helium balloons into the air above Anaheim, California. Everyone had seen it on the news. It was fun. It made the Guinness Book of World Records. Cleveland would do them one better. Cleveland would do them 800,000 better, and release 2 million balloons. And with them would rise the spirits of a people who had gone through a tough few decades, and maybe start picking up the city itself. And the United Way would raise a bunch of money too. They would get school kids to sell sponsorships. They'd bring well-heeled donors to watch the launch, and they'd open up their wallets wide. First, it had to shell out $200,000. That's how much the balloon launch would cost. They had to hire the project manager, and they didn't skimp there. They brought in the same guy who did Disneyland. Then there's security and permits and promotion and helium. It was a lot of helium. They had to build out the infrastructure, a rectangular cage of scaffolding 3 stories tall, draped with a net that formed its roof, but that could stretch and expand as it filled with balloons like aluminum foil on one of those old Jiffy Pop popcorns. They brought in tanks of helium and built a network of copper tubing that ran in a grid on the ground beneath the netting. They had to rent tables and chairs for the people who sat by the spigots where they could tap into the helium and fill the balloons. They had to have food and drinks and first aid and portable toilets. They had to have biodegradable balloons, and those cost extra. But they didn't need to pay for labor. 2,500 volunteers, mostly culled from the ranks of Cuyahoga County's high school marching bands. Kids who knew how to work in tandem. Kids with dexterous fingers. Kids who probably didn't have anything better to do on Friday night. Sorry, current and former band kids. They were put to the task of filling and tying and letting fly, several per minute, joining the growing roof of balloons, yellow and green and red and white and blue. And they got to stay up all night. So many, surely for the first time in their lives. Got to drink Cokes and eat chips and see what the world was like at 3:45 a.m. See dawn break. See the sun rise over their city. see their friends in that odd hue cast by the light passing through 700,000 balloons. 800,000. 9. A momentary glow cast on the boy who plays glockenspiel, who you'd never noticed before, but he kept cracking you up with the things he'd say when he sucked down another balloon and his voice would go all high while the DJ played your favorite song. All of that was welcome distraction from the pain. From filling and tying biodegradable latex balloons 3 or 4 per minute for hours and hours, fingertips cracking, the ones you needed to push the valves on your trumpet, now wrapped up in band-aids, but you pushed through. This was bigger than you, bigger than any of them. And it was growing, balloon by balloon, over their heads. A bulging dome. Growing along with the sense that they were part of something special. So they pressed on, manufacturing wonder, in the city where their grandparents had manufactured car parts or airplane propellers, where maybe their parents wished they themselves still could. By morning, the weather had turned. The wind was picking up, and there was rain expected around lunchtime. And the organizers knew it didn't make sense to keep pushing for 2 million. 2 million was an arbitrary figure anyway. A round number to rally around, but really, 1.4 something million balloons was astounding. It would break the world's record by more than 200,000. And when they were all up there, who could tell the difference anyway? So at 1:50 p.m. on a September Saturday in 1986, just shy of 1.5 million helium balloons rose above what is now the 53rd largest city in America. But what was then still the 18th, and on that afternoon it must have felt like things were looking up. As Clevelanders looked up, and the volunteers looked up to marvel at what they'd done, at what they'd pulled off by pulling together. A roiling cloud of balloons ascending, pushing up through the rain that was really coming down now, all those individual latex balloons, yellow and green and red and white and blue, forming a billowing mass, like one organism, swelling and bulging and flowing, rising above this all-American city. The rules of refraction and optics and color theory making the collective cloud appear rust-colored as it engulfed the terminal tower, like some nuclear-age blob unleashed upon Godzilla's Tokyo. Balloons whipping by its windows, past the people inside, and climbing through the pattering rain to catch unseen currents above a city on the rise, and disappear into the sky that spread out over the land, fed by the Cuyahoga River. Now you, dear listener, familiar with the laws of physics as you are, will know that 1.5 million things going up must come down. And you, dear listener, familiar with the reputation of the city of Cleveland, as you may be, may have already guessed that this whole thing was going to go south. And you, dear listener, sharp as you are, will surely know what happens when balloon-related metaphors seized upon as a means towards civic renewal fly too close to the sun. All that's left is to pick up the pieces, or to let them biodegrade. The hundreds of thousands of deflated balloons lapping in the foam on the sandy shores of Lake Erie, 240 miles away in Canada. The innumerable fish and birds who choked on them. The Arabian horse a whole county away, who was spooked by the cloud of balloons and stumbled and hurt himself so badly, his owner got a $100,000 settlement from the United Way. The drivers who collided, swerving, blinded in the blizzard of balloons. The airport that shut down for the afternoon to clear its runway of balloons. And the 2 fishermen, most tragically, who'd capsized in the lake in the storm that day. And when the Coast Guard went to look for them, hoping to spot their colorful life jackets bobbing in the water, were staring at a lake utterly covered with colorful balloons. Both fishermen were later found dead, washed ashore. The wife of one of them sued the United Way for $3.2 million and settled for an undisclosed amount. The Guinness Book of World Records certified Balloon Fest 86 as the largest ever mass balloon release, with an official total of 1,429,643 balloons. It is a record that will likely never be broken, and may I humbly suggest, never should be. This episode of The Memory Palace is written and produced and the like by me, Nate DiMeo, with engineering assistance from Elizabeth Aubert and research assistance from Eliza McGraw. We get our ad music from JD Sampson. We get ad-serving technology from AdZerk. The show is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network from PRX. We have this summer welcomed 2 new full-fledged members to the Radiotopia family. 2 new shows that are both deeply worth your time. There is Everything is Alive from producer Ian Chillog, in which he, a human being, interviews inanimate objects like a soon-to-be expiring can of generic cola, like a lamppost. It is delightful and surprisingly informative and like nothing else out there. And I really value things that are like nothing else out there. And there is Zigzag from Manoush Zamarodi and Jen Poyant, who used to host and produce respectively an excellent tech show for WNYC, and who have now cut out on their own to create not just a new show, but a new media company. And Zigzag is an intimate, super smart, super fun diary of this 2-woman startup as it tries to do what all of us here at Radiotopia are doing. They're making a bet on themselves and trying to make a living and maybe more doing what they love, calling their own shots, owning their own content. Listen to both those shows and any of the independent producer-owned podcasts at radiotopia.fm.
Radiotopia.